After a few days, I did eventually find the nail file, and it was under my mousepad, my laptop mousepad. And let me say this, I looked there when I was looking for the nail file. I was looking under my mousepad also, and it wasn't there before, so I thought that was really weird.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people. Because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
And all of a sudden I hear him go, whoa, or, something like that. So I look up, and as I look up, I see this thing.
And I said, I've never seen a butterfly like you before.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
As soon as I spoke to it, it turns around and makes eye contact with me. And then it stands upright.
And it was at that moment that I saw it was like an orange light appear above this row of trees. From this sort of orange light, this thing appeared. Its wings were actually like sycamore leaf shaped.
And I started talking to them. I'm like, hi, are y'all the dwarves? And I would hear whispers that would say, hi, yeah, you want to play? And it wasn't just my imagination. And I had told them, I'm like, my dwarves, they like beer, And my dad's like, yeah, sure, your dwarves like beer. And they were holding a conversation, and his beer slid upwards instead of downwards, how the house was tilted. And him and my brothers jumped up.
So I stopped calling out Adam, and I'm just my mind draws a blank, and I stop behind that tree stump. I'm pretty close to it now because I took a few steps forward, and I see this thing.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. Tonight, we're traveling to Poland to talk with Monica. Monica, how are things going in Poland tonight?
So far, so good. Today was a pretty rainy day, but now the sun is peeking through the clouds and it's nice.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that you've got the rain stopping, because it's always easier to record when there's no rain. And my favorite joke to make is every podcast in the world has to start by talking about the weather. So thank you for telling me about the weather over in Poland today. Jokes aside, if it's okay with you, Monica, I spend 1 minute at the start of every show just kind of explaining how the show works for yourself and for the audience listening. Is it okay if I do that for you now?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. The first thing I like to say is that it is part of my show's philosophy that I am not trying to be convinced. You don't have to convince me that this stuff is happening. I know that fairy stuff and fairy contact is super weird, and it is enough of a challenge to just communicate what is happening without the added pressure of trying to convince myself or the audience of anything. So please don't feel any pressure to convince me. I just want to create some space and room to hear what's going on with you. And that's pretty much the format of the show. The second thing I like to tell every guest who comes on this show is that I do think it is brave to come on the show and talk about fairy subject matter. And, we had a brief pre-conversation. I really think also your choice of, your educational and career path is brave. And I sense a lot of bravery from you to begin with. And I just want to acknowledge that. It is hard to talk about this stuff. It is not always accepted by everybody. And then finally, Monica, I just like to let you, my guest, know the way that I like to do things here on Fascinating Fae is I like to give you a lot of space and time to explain, as much as you feel is necessary to help me and the audience listening understand what you've come here to talk about tonight. Now, I have a little bit of idea about you and some objects that you might be talking about, but what I'll ask you to do is, if, to what degree you feel comfortable, just sort of introduce yourself a little bit and, let myself and the audience know what happened and what's going on.
Sure. So, do I start talking about already about the Fae and the disappearances?
If you want to, you can start wherever you feel comfortable. If you want to tell me and the audience a little bit more about yourself before you start talking about those events, that's usually a great way to start.
Okay, so I actually might do a little bit of a backstory here because you see, so I am 24 years old now, and for 2 years now, I had this interest when all of a sudden, over 2 years ago, I became very, very obsessed with my city and my local history, and I started really researching it deeply and in detail. And what is important to mention is that my city is mostly made of woods. There is only 20% that is there are houses and streets, and the rest are woods. So I am very how do I say this? I feel very, very connected to the woods in a way because it's basically everywhere around me, and I basically grew up there. When I was a little girl, I was always on a walk in the woods. And later, when I became really, really passionate about my local history, I started exploring the woods in greater detail. So I had some specific places that I frequented more often, and I was looking for basically for signs of the past there, because I knew that there were maybe some things happened there a few hundreds years ago, and I was looking for the signs. So what I mean by this is I'm very connected with the woods that are near me, that are in my city. And I feel very, very at home there. And there is this specific place in the woods nearby my home that is, by the way, like in between the woods and the river. So I think it's also important to mention that it's also by the water, which might be important in the context of faith. And even before I ever started researching the folklore of faith, even before I got interested in all of that, I remember I called that place in the forest the fairy forest, because it really looks much different than all the other places in my forest. It just looks absolutely dreamy and beautiful, and it looks just like fairies live there. So I remember I always call it that, the fairy forest. And then maybe a little over a year ago, I also started reading a lot about the fairy folklore and mythology, because I really got interested in Celtic mythology as well as my local Slavic mythology here. And I specifically felt drawn to the stories about the Fae. And I started reading all about how fairies are these little nice but also chaotic and mischievous creatures that live in the nature, and they can become easily offended, but you can try and build a relationship with them and see where it all leads. So I thought, great, I really want to become a friend of the Fae. But it wasn't really until much later, and that is about a month ago, since I started actually doing something about it. So the thing that I read and researched the most about the Fae was about how basically, if you want to build a relationship with them, you need to start by giving them offerings. And I mean, I have an opportunity to do that almost every day. The part of the woods that I call the fairy woods or the fairy forest is very near my house. So I have a way to visit it almost every day. And yeah, about a month ago, I started gathering things that I thought that the Fae might like the most. And now I know that they like things like cookies and milk and honey and berries, but not really things that already grow in the forest, because they already know that, right? So I started gathering things that I have in my garden, for example, or how homemade cookies and milk, and I started bringing that stuff every few days to the forest, to the what I call the fairy forest, that special place in my woods. And I thought that the perfect place, the altar to leave those offerings, would be the tree stumps that are there. So yeah, I just started visiting that place every day. I started putting my offerings, my gifts in those tree stumps, and what always when I'm there, when I'm in that forest, I'm also speaking out loud, like I'm talking to the Fae. I still don't know really how to communicate with them, and I don't know if just like thought transmission, just saying things in my head would be enough. So whenever I'm there and I want to communicate with them, like, here's my offering for you, I just say it out loud to make sure that they basically receive the message. And I have been doing this for, like I said, around maybe a month now. And what happened with the disappearances was that one day I noticed that in my room, on my wait, how do I call it? On my desk, my nail file disappeared, and that in itself isn't really something special, because sometimes I lose things, but I couldn't find it. I really couldn't find it anywhere. And later on the same day, I noticed that another thing from my room had disappeared, and it was a little container with glitter inside it. And to be precise, it was a makeup product. It was a glitter that you can, for example, put on your face, but I also used it for other purposes. Like whenever I was making candles from wax, I was putting the glitter there. So I use it for many purposes. And that also disappeared. And the third thing that happened was I have a Tamagotchi, the toy, and I've had it since over a year. I got it for my birthday in April last year. And I think it was also on that day when the disappearances happened, I noticed that my Tamagotchi stopped working completely. I couldn't even turn it on. And let me be very clear that this has never really happened before. Like I was saying, it's a new Tamagotchi. There's no way that it would, get destroyed that quickly. So that was suspicious to me. Eventually, I managed to turn it on back, but it did take me a while. And as for the things that disappeared, after a few days, I did eventually find the nail file, and it was under my mouse pad, my laptop mouse pad. And let me say this, I looked there when I was looking for the nail file. I was looking under my mousepad also, and it wasn't there before. So I thought that was really weird. And as for the glitter, for the face glitter, it turned out to be in my makeup bag, but I also really don't remember putting it there. So I thought, well, yeah, maybe I like automatically put it there without thinking, and then I forgot about it. But I really can't recall doing that, to be honest. So that's the story about all the things that happened, the disappearances and the broke down Tamagotchi.
Monica, thank you so much for taking the time to give the backstory and outline all of those events. I love that they put it back under your mouse pad. They're so funny.
Right. And like I was saying, I looked under there before. So when I saw that it's under the mousepad, I was like, what the heck? Am I going crazy? I looked there before, and it just wasn't there.
There's so many things I would like to say, but before I do, I want to kind of just ask you some more general questions about kind of some of the earlier stuff you told me in your storytelling. And then let's circle back around to these objects, and I'll do what I offered earlier on, our pre-conversation. I'm going to give you some of my ideas about what objects moving like that means. And I can tell you a lot of examples from others that have told me similar stories, and that's how I kind of come up with what I think it means. But before we do that, I'm curious about some things. So you mentioned something that is interesting to me about you becoming interested in folklore. And you mentioned specifically like Slavic folklore. I will admit I have zero knowledge about, Slavic folklore as it relates to the Fae. Could you just briefly tell me like how Polish society and, Slavic folklore address the Fae? Is it something that, as a society is accepted and you guys know about, similar to the Irish, or is it much more taboo and not mainstream?
Well, when it comes to the Slavic mythology, we don't really have a one-to-one Slavic version of the Fae. It's not really in our folklore. We have something similar to the house Fae, which are the brownies. I'm sure you know what these are.
Absolutely. I'm familiar with the brownie description. Little dudes and gals living in your house.
Yeah, exactly. Little helpers. So we do have something similar to that, and they were in the Slavic mythology. They were called skrzaty. And the description was very, very similar to the brownies. So little dudes, also very old dudes. They always had a long white beard, and they were helping around the house, helping with chores, cooking, cleaning, and people were also leaving them offerings around the house. And there's also an overlap within the offerings, because people always knew that the skrzaty like milk and cookies, just really just like the brownies in the Irish folklore, and they were leaving basically the same stuff: milk, cookies, and honey for the skrzaty in our little Slavic houses a long time ago.
Interesting that there's a bit of a foundation there for contextual understanding of what these might be kind of already in your brain. You know what's so fascinating, Monica, is when I started this program 3 years ago, the very first guy that I ever talked to, named Ron, talked about giving an offering of cookies to his fairies as a way of establishing communication and goodwill. And at the time, there's so many things about talking to Ron I was not prepared for, but the theme of giving fairies cookies as an offering has come up a number of times on this show. Vicky gave a cookie to a troll that she noticed was living in her backyard in Mexico. I recently spoke to another woman who just intuitively said, if I was going to try to start a relationship with fairies, I think I would use cookies. It's come up a lot that they like cookies. Even Harper, recently, another woman I spoke to, was having kind of a problematic relationship with fairies in her home. And in order to appease that and create peace, she did research and did exactly what you're describing, gave them milk and honey. And it apparently worked, because the day after she did that, she started to receive gifts from the fairies. So it's very, very interesting that from all the way around the world, with no previous knowledge of me or the show, that you're talking again about cookies as an offering that fairies like, and that it even goes back into Slavic folklore. How cool is that? So, yeah, cookies and fairies. Who would have guessed?
Exactly, and it almost seems intuitive, like people with no previous knowledge about the fairy folklore. They, like you said about that one girl, she intuitively thought, I should give them cookies if I want to build a relationship. Same, quite frankly, with the Slavic folk. I'm sure they didn't really have that much sources to learn about the entities from their folklore, but somehow they all knew that the offering that they should give are cookies. So yeah, I agree. That's really interesting and really specific. And yeah, the Fae must really like their cookies a lot.
What kind of cookie did you use?
Just a regular. Wait, let me check how they're called in English. Uh, just biscuits. Biscuits. I'm also planning to give them something homemade one day, definitely. But so far, I really haven't made anything for them since I'm not that great in baking and stuff. But also at the same time, I really want to try because I really do put a lot of effort into building this relationship with them. For example, a few days ago, I started even gathering stones because I've heard that the Fae might like if you give them a stone that, for example, you painted or something like that. And I started gathering stones and I painted one stone. I basically painted a little tree on it because I thought that might be the correspondence that the Fae might like, because I think they really love nature since mm, I figured they live in the forest, in the woods, so they probably like trees. So I painted a little tree on the stone and I sprinkled it with glitter, with the glitter that they gave back to me, basically. And it, the stone looked really beautiful. The glitter looked like the tree was blooming, like in spring. And I really liked how that turned out. So that same day, I instantly went to the forest, to the fairy forest, and I gave it to them. And I told them I really like how this painting on the stone turned out, and I hope that you like it too. Oh, and also, what I usually tell them is that um, this this offering is wait, how do I say it? Uh, Basically, I say that this gift is a sign of my friendship or my sympathy for them, and I always underline it that there are no hidden intentions from me, that I don't want anything back from them, so that they don't have to worry about debt, because I'm aware that in the Fae world, they are really serious about death and having to basically for everything to be even. So I'm always making sure to tell them that this is just an offering, this is just a gift. It's just a sign that I really like you, and that's it.
You know, Monica, it's fascinating to talk with you. I'm very much enjoying listening to all of these perspectives that you're sharing. I want to keep moving through some of my my more general questions, and then I want to get over to this object stuff in a second. So I think that you telling that backstory is an extremely important piece of context here. Thanks for initially kind of going a little deeper into how Slavic folklore would deal with the concept of a fae. Now I'm more interested in you and how you are dealing with the concept of a fae. So just to explain, I mean, half of what I find fascinating on the show is how each individual person is relating to this topic. Some people never expected anything to do with fairies and all of a sudden find themselves talking to me because they're confused about why objects are disappearing and reappearing. You, however, are the opposite of that, which is you're intentionally trying to establish a relationship, and then thereafter you're getting that object communication stuff taking place, which is so fascinating to contemplate. So that's why I want to ask you a little bit more about what you were thinking and feeling 2 years ago. So what made you start this fascination with your local history and branching out from there, you know, getting into Fae? Like, what was the trigger? Can you recall, or did it just all of a sudden come over you that you started to get interested in this stuff?
Well, about the local history, it just really came to me as a fixation, to be honest. It's just that my brain always finds stuff and hobbies to be obsessed about, and I always throughout my life had at least one topic at a time that I was very, very deeply invested in, and I was just spending my days researching it. That's also what gives me a lot of joy in life. I really like to explore and learn, and I like to learn things that are long forgotten, like some parts of the history of my town even, and I really love rediscovering them. I am very, very passionate and interested about this. But when it comes to my interest in the Fae and the folklore, it came a bit later, and I think it it isn't a fixation for me per se, because I'm not. It's not like my brain is basically forcing me to be interested in this and research this topic, but it's more like I feel really, really drawn to this. You know, I feel really drawn to the world of faith. And it's a bit like how we spoke earlier about how I was the weird, quiet, autistic child in kindergarten, and how I always kind of felt different, and I kind of wanted a world that I felt like I would fit in. So when I learned about the folklore, about the fae, mm, I was feeling like, wow, this feels really comfortable. This is a bit different than the world that I know, but I I love it, and I wish that I could maybe even be one of the Fae. I know I'm probably not, but I felt like this seems like such a fascinating world to live in, and it's very much like this outlet for me that I'm I'm so fed up with people here in this world and with interactions, and I'm really burnt out from the everyday stuff that even just fantasizing and thinking and daydreaming about that other world, it gives me a lot of comfort. I think that's it.
I'm just collecting my thoughts. So, fascinating is the best word for it. That's the name of this show, Fascinating Fae, because they're fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Also, it's so interesting for me to listen to you speak out loud that inner desire to perhaps even be like Faye or to be one, because I've got to tell you, not to jump too far ahead of myself, but my growing hypothesis around this subject matter has grown to include that I do think there's fairy bloodline running through the population, and your natural draw to this stuff, the way that you describe it yourself as feeling just very, very drawn to it, seems completely authentic to me without embellishment. And it seems to be coming from this very resonant place because, I'm going to keep listening to you here, but I'm already checking the boxes in my head for those people I talk to who are fairies and who are being communicated with by the fairies using objects as a means of activating their understanding about their true nature. And I'm rapidly, as I listen to you, starting to kind of file you into that category.
Wow. So are you saying that the Fae know if a human person might be one of them?
In my estimation, yes, 100%. That is factually an accurate way to describe it. Exactly like that.
That's really awesome. And also, that really makes me think, what if my fascination with the Fae, let's call it that, what if it all started because, I don't know, I had to, I don't know, I just had to explore sooner or later this world and learn something more about, I don't know, maybe about myself. I'm not sure though. I don't know if I'm a fairy or not, but let me tell you, I would really love that because I love how everything works in their world. It feels very, very safe and almost like familiar to me, but yeah, I would really love to be a part of that world.
That word familial and familiar comes up a lot and comes out of the mouth a lot of people just like you that I have the privilege of speaking to. And again, you don't know me, but there's a huge body of work behind me. I think I've published almost 100 episodes now, and I've spoken to a lot of people about the fairy subject matter, the fairy phenomenon, and its manifestations. And going back into 2019, when I saw that fairy that came through the wheelhouse glass of my boat, that opened up like an area of inquiry in my mind that had previously never existed. And I have been shocked and stunned and continuously humbled and confused as I go. But it's become through that huge process, which is totally transparent and you could go back and listen to every thought and idea and word I've ever had about this, because it's all there for the record. I have definitely arrived at the conclusion that there was a time in history when human beings and fairies were in relationships of cohabitation that were much more open, transparent, and known to one another. And that, I don't know the reason why, but the retreat into, hiding, which I guess we could all sort of agree kind of seems to be the most common way to find fairies, understood, is that they're hiding. They're not really here anymore. Sorry, let me just re-articulate that. I was distracted, and I'll edit around this. So what I'm trying to say is this. In the past, when all the fairies and human beings cohabited, we knew about each other. It wasn't so shocking to understand that, we existed to one another. I don't know where we went wrong, but we probably let them down. Probably our disgusting treatment of the planet, broke their hearts and they stopped wanting to be friends, is pretty much the summary that I'll give it, even though I don't really know the history. That's my best guess. And now in this time, there is a reawakening of relationships. But in that time immemorial, the time in the distant past I'm referring to, I think not only was there cohabitation, there was co-mingling of the bloodlines and energy lines of humans and fae. And I think that in the populace, there still runs very deep, bloodlines of fae blood within the human population. I also think that humans in general are not that different than fairies. We have magical capabilities within us, just like them. I think that the main difference is that we are kind of stuck within our bodies in this third dimensional understanding of the world, and they are not. They are free from bodies, so to speak. But the inner soul that we possess and that they possess, I think, is made of the exact same stuff. And so that's kind of the backdrop for where I make my statements that I think you might be a fairy. But it really comes down for me to this object communication trajectory that you just outlined for me, what seems like the story of unlocking understanding about one's true nature that many, many people have shared. I mean, I can probably, when we're done, do a little playlist for you and give you 5 or 6 episodes to listen to that will help you broaden this conversation I'm having with you now into like a deeper understanding that not only are you starting to realize this about yourself, a lot of people in fact are. And so, your high intelligence, your very direct and peaceful communication style, the way that you articulate your desires, wishes, and dreams, all of these characteristics strike me as so similar to the many guests I've spoken to who are starting to realize their true nature and their true capability. And not to jump too far ahead, but I might as well kind of keep going here because I can tell this might be something that you're interested in hearing. So here's what I think about what you've done. You have obviously found something that is calling to you. And it sounds to me, listening to you speak, that it is an authentic calling, not just a fixation or an interest. A huge differentiation there was made, and I really felt it. And so through learning about it, which, you have to kind of laugh at yourself and even me. Like, at what point does a person go, okay, maybe fairies are in fact real. I'm going to go do something about it. And you told me a very interesting detail there, which is that you learned about all this and you maybe held inside your heart the thought that they are real for some time, but it wasn't until recently that you started to take action. And when you get over that threshold of taking action, you now start to unlock what is really there. So your intuition is functioning really, really well. I mean, it's leading you from a place where you had no interest before, all the way down and through to leaving an offering and then having a response. So it seems like, to me, a familiar story. It seems like a story driven by your own intuition. And I'm just feeding back to you what I hear as I listen to you, nothing more. But let's talk about objects for a second, because it is so important. Okay, so allowing for the fact that fairies are real, which is the premise of this show, so we should allow for it in this conversation. But allowing for that fact, I have established through data collection that they are using objects as a way of communicating. And I'll tell you what I think is going on here. So for you, you're making these offerings, and the logical understanding here is that your offerings were received and contact was made. And the fairies are sensitive to the human condition. They are not necessarily just going to show up in your doorway glowing like a lightning bolt and make you lose your mind. You know, they're not going to overwhelm you with too much too soon. But they do want you to know that they're there. And when you say, okay, I'm missing something, that is the first act of a very familiar symphony. And that impossible disappearance is a paradox, which fairies are themselves a paradox. So they communicate in paradox. And then when you're looking, and you can't find it, that period of time is a time in which your brain is changing. You know, whether you know it or not, you're on the hunt and you're looking to resolve an unresolvable question. And they are mischievous, like you said, nice but chaotic, really well put. They like that. They kind of get a kick out of watching you search and pull out your hair and get confused. And then when they put it back somewhere funny or impossible, this completes the paradox. So the whole sequence of events has the signature of fairies on it. They took something which they, doesn't belong to them and that you're going to miss, something intimate, usually something that is used every day or is held on the person, keys, phones, wallets, identification cards, jewelry items, hair clips, earbuds, nail files in your case, all usually a very common choice of object to play this game with. And so what they're doing is they're kind of answering your question without words, and they are, through that sequence of initial loss, search, and then impossible return, are giving you a ton of information. Number one, I'm here. Number two, what you think of as stable and real is not necessarily stable and real. I can dematerialize this object and I can put it back somewhere that you've already checked, and you'll have to check again and then it'll be there. Like that, all of that suggests to me anyway, after this long work that I've been doing, that they're not hiding it. I think they're somehow taking it out of this reality for a while and then putting it back. And so that capability of, disappearing and reappearing objects is a capability that is nothing short of magical. And if you, Monica, as you listen to me, connect that what I'm saying has some truth to it, it is likely that you will start to continue to increase the degree to which this relationship is unfolding. Many dozens of people I've spoken to will now do such things as talk out loud and say, okay, I know you're here, and can you give me another sign? I spoke to a woman recently who did exactly that, and a dime, like a 10-cent piece coin, fell out of the sky and landed on her head right as she asked for a sign.
Wow, that's really amazing. beyond a coincidence, like unbelievable.
Absolutely. Harper, who I mentioned, gave an offering. The next day, she went out into her yard after doing a midnight offering and was walking up the stairs into her house. And a shiny penny from 2007 was slipped into her open-toed shoe, like a gift. And the next day, she was walking again in a separate area on the grass, and another 2007 penny materialized from right in front of her and was slipped into her shoe. And then it happened again a third day. But similarly to you, there was a tentativeness about, is this real? Is this happening? That, was answered initially by confusion around objects, just like you're describing. But after acknowledging that that object moving around was the fairy, which is what Harper did, she then got a direct acknowledgement, like I'm describing, in the form of these pennies. Many guests who have come to the conclusion that their missing and reappearing stuff is the work of fairies will voice that out loud, and either directly or very shortly afterwards get a huge confirming event that escalates. Here's another example just to show you what I mean by escalation. Here you have one or two items go missing, and I do think also, by the way, your Tamagotchi is related, because they absolutely will interfere with electronics that you are using and using a lot. And a Tamagotchi is kind of like a toy pet, so it's very intimate. You're touching it every day. That's definitely a target for their tactics. All of these little subtle, reality-breaking, confusing motions that they're making without words are them. It's them every time. And what you're describing to me, not just the nail file going and coming back, but everything that you've talked to me about for the past hour seems like an extremely familiar story. And here's my conclusion. They are only going to do object communication with people that they want relationships with. So they've chosen you. They've assessed you. They absolutely can read your mind. So when you're out there in the forest and you're saying it in your head, that's definitely good enough. There's 100 examples on the show of them being able to know your heart and know your mind without you saying a word. And if you've done everything that you've described as you've described, and what is now starting to happen is you're having objects appear and disappear, and you're going on Reddit looking for answers, that's when I'm gonna find you. that's literally become my MO. I'm like Van Helsing, the vampire hunter. Instead of hunting vampires, I'm hunting fairies. And I'm trying to help them understand you are not experiencing events that you are describing in isolation. You are experiencing intimate contact with an interdimensional, and one that is trying to let you know that it's there. And what will come next for me will be extreme interest in to see what unfolds for you, after we talk. Anyway, that's a lot of information I just unloaded on you, and I talked for a little longer than I usually like to do during the show. But I wanted you to really understand what I mean when I say I think you've kind of done it. I think you've intuitively navigated your way to a real cusp of understanding. And I'm just trying to push you over the edge and help you understand where you've been headed. I mean, you definitely are, at the very least, a fairy familiar with whom they would like to make some contact. That is absolutely clear to me based on what you've described.
Thank you. That is very important to me, as I just want to keep learning about them and their world. And also, what you said was very encouraging, that they did all of that stuff with my things disappearing, because essentially what you're saying is that they reached out to me to let me know that they know about me and that they want to build this relationship. Because to be honest, I was really panicking when all that disappearance stuff was happening, because what I was thinking was more like, oh, they must really have hated my gifts, so now they're doing all of these pranks on me. to show me that I'm just not welcome in their world, that they are doing this on purpose to, I don't know, scare me away from contacting them.
I think it's the exact opposite. I think it's a direct acknowledgement that you are being witnessed, received, and acknowledged when you're in the woods. And the way you describe the fairy forest as being situated near water and having a kind of magical quality to it, and that this is the area that you're selecting as your offering point. I mean, I would even go so far as to say you have probably brought home with you Fae from that section of forest. And keeping in mind that we are dealing with a non-physical intelligence. So they can be multiple places at once. They can be multiple times at once. And I'm of the perspective that when they take something, make you look for it, and give it back, that it all is done by them at one time in one simultaneous motion, like a single motion of the hand. They like take it, make you wait, give it back to you, and they can kind of interact with and perceive all of those events and all of the time associated with the time between those events. They can just feel, do, and experience all that at once. And why I think that is, like, I spoke to a woman. I'll just give an example to help you understand why I think that. There's a woman from the United Kingdom who lost a wedding ring, or so she thought. Her husband lost a wedding ring, and for 3.5 years they couldn't find it. But then one day she caught a video footage of a gnome on camera, just similar to these house brownies we're talking about. And in her mind, just in her mind, she asked for the ring back. And the next thing that happened is she opened the door to go outside to walk the dog, and the ring that had been missing for 3.5 years was right there on the center floorboard, right in front of the door that had just opened. And I don't think that the fairy waited around for 3.5 years. I think that the taking of the item and the giving of the item back all happened at once. And so what feels like a long time of looking to us is absolutely nothing to them. But they do delight in making us look, because they are mischievous. And I understand why you might think that that stuff is signaling that they're unhappy with you. Because I always say the fairies give you a barbed wire wrapped gift. They give you a gift, but it's kind of wrapped up in knives, and you have to kind of, use your intuition to pick your way through the tougher parts to understand, to get to the kernel of truth within. But absolutely, if you've left an offering and then your nail file is going missing, looking everywhere, and then finally showing up under your mouse pad, it's the under your mouse pad part that lets me know 100% that it is fairies, because they're funny. And putting your nail file under your mouse pad is funny, because it would never be there.
Exactly. And I would never hide it there.
It would make it difficult to use your mouse. So why would you do that? That's how you know it's them, because the signature is always humorous. The return is always humorous. And that's how you also know it's non-threatening. It's also like, in relationships with people, there's always like a dominant person in any relationship with any two people. It just sucks, but it's usually the way it goes. Whether it's a romantic relationship, a work relationship, whatever, there's always someone who tries to be the dominant one. And unfortunately, one of the aspects about fairies that I don't always love is they're a little bit dominant. And so even though it's totally nonviolent, they are showing you, I can fuck with your stuff. I'm a little bit of your superior, because look at how silly you feel looking for this thing, and I've had it all along. Na boo boo. Kind of like a bit of a boastful child, a little bit. That's another very, very common folklore thing you hear about them, is they're a little bit easily offended, they're a little bit bossy, they're a little bit, have a superiority complex. And I do think taking your stuff and giving it back on some level is kind of a jerk move, which as brilliant of a communication strategy as it is to let you know that you're there, that they are there, it is still a little bit like not always that nice. And some people have really looked for stuff for a really, really long time. But if you start to understand that it's them, and if you can psychologically suppress your doubt and you allow yourself to fully step into the reality that that was a fairy that did that, I assure you more will happen that defies reality. People have had objects spontaneously materialize right in front of them dozens of times. Monica, I've spoken to people on the show, live on air, and stuff has been materialized in front of people while I'm talking to them. So it'll escalate. It'll go from an initial steal of an object and a return to maybe more of the same, maybe a bigger object. What I was going to say earlier, and I'll just finish here and pass off to you for some more of your thoughts. The most recent woman I published, she had an entire jewelry bag go missing from her bag on the airplane. And she thought someone had stolen it when she went to go use the washroom, because it was the only time she was away and separate from her bag of jewelry. But she had been having weird stuff disappear and reappear in the months and weeks beforehand. And when she got home, slowly over the course of a year and a half, every single item of jewelry in that bag mysteriously reappeared in a funny place that she hadn't put it. So, that's what I mean by escalation. It'll go from one object to many. It'll go from a return a few hours later to a return a week later. But it'll always come back somewhere funny, unexpected, or impossible. That's what they like to do. Anyway, with all that said, I'm curious what your response to any of that might be as we kind of just, talk here tonight.
Absolutely. And I have this thought about how you said that the Fae can sometimes be a little domineering, or they can come across as jerks. I have always had the feeling that they are in some way tough, the concept of tough love personified. So that way they might show you something or lead you towards something that you need to see, you need to know, you need to learn about yourself or maybe others, but it might not be the way that you want it to happen. So some inconveniences might happen, just like the disappearances and other little pranks that many people, including me, have thought that they are harmful, that they are the fairies essentially being mean to them. But I definitely think that this is some kind of tough love strategy now that we talk about it, because essentially what is happening is that the Fae are trying to communicate something fairly important to you. They do want to tell you something, but they just don't know or don't have the way of focusing your attention on themselves in any other way. So they resort to like stealing your stuff and doing other like shenanigans. So yeah, that's what I think. I think that they might be trying to show something or tell something important to many people, but they just do it in these big ways that people might even misinterpret as mean or as harmful, but maybe it's not meant to be that. Maybe it's meant to be something positive. Maybe the Fae are trying to help. And yeah, I'm also curious, what do you think about this? And like, is it always that the Fae are basically have good intentions when they reach out to you, or maybe if there are also instances when they do reach out but they don't have good intentions, because it has been a concern of mine as well. And I'm just wondering if that's possible, because, well, also logically thinking, if they really hated the person that wants to communicate with them and befriend them, they would probably ignore them. That's the most logical outcome, I think. But I don't know, maybe there's a possibility that they would reach out but do something harmful and mean. I don't know if that's possible. What do you think?
I think they can be unpredictable. And that's the most honest answer I can give. I don't come on this show saying this is fantasy, Disney movie time, and these are all Tinkerbell. I certainly don't say that. In fact, I mean, depending on your attitude towards getting fucked with, the idea of having your stuff taken or not could be extremely offensive to some and feel very disempowering and violating. So, but going back to what you very astutely said, I do think they are trying to teach something. And I like what you just said there for the past sort of 4 or 5 minutes. I sometimes, when I listen back to myself, I recognize I'm too close to this. I think I know too much. And when I listen to you just articulate what your intuition was largely giving you to work with, it sounds both what I actually think and just a lot fresher as a take. Because it is really fascinating to talk with you as you have these questions and you're at this early stage of contact and acceptance. So I hesitate all the time to know if I'm helping when I do this show. I want to also make sure because I haven't told you this and it's important, I am not a fairy expert and I don't claim to be. I saw one and I've become deeply fascinated, and everything that I'm telling you that sounds like I know what I'm talking about is only coming from hundreds of hours of published conversations with people where I've just, been figuring it out as I go to the best of my ability. And some patterns are unmistakable, and those are the ones I'm speaking about with confidence, especially this use of objects, the way that objects are used, and what it indicates. For me, anyway, I think that you're right. Like, if they don't like you, it's not going to take the form of games in your house. It's going to be something potentially quite damaging happening in and around you. And this whole thing can be very confusing because I personally don't engage in the act of doing offerings. I'm not judging that you do. I think, in fact, the fact that you've done offerings and had this outcome is the foundation of this episode and is so deeply fascinating to think about, and I believe you. But I don't do it myself because I am still not exactly clear what I'm dealing with. Having said that, I do think that doing this show and publishing it every week, whether I like it or not, is my offering to the Fae on a grand scale, because I'm talking about them and bringing them focus and bringing them new minds every week that are thinking about them and focusing on them. And so to what extent you are contributing your story without really knowing whether it's good or bad, I think is extremely authentic because I don't really know either. Having said that, I've not seen any direct harm come to a person at the hand of a Fae throughout this catalog that I can really think of. I've seen a lot of inconveniences. I've seen a lot of head-scratching, confusion, but I've never seen anything that I felt, was so badly intended that this person was coming to me talking about how they had been dealing with Fae that are ruining their lives. I've just not really heard that. The closest I think I would come is Harper. Let me give you an example because I think it's a contextually relevant episode to refer to answer your question about whether they're good or bad or what their intentions are. Harper and her husband had no previous interest in fairies. They're just living their lives in the Pacific Northwest. But one day they started to have objects disappear in their house. It started with like one earphone from an AirPod set mysteriously disappearing like right in front of them. Another thing that happened is some like turkey deli meat disappeared like right off of a table in front of them that no one could explain. And there were some little things happening like that they couldn't really figure out. And it started to feel like negative in their house. And there was an incident where the family's dog attacked their 10-year-old son. And they really were looking at like the way stuff was going weird in the house, the weird feeling in the house, and this attack. And they started looking into like what could be happening from that lens. And as they were looking and looking and looking, they kind of were given some idea that this might be fairies and what they might be able to do about it. And Harper especially put kind of two and two together, which is that close to their house, a large forested area, which was hundreds of years old, had recently been cut down extremely aggressively to make way for a new road. And all these trees had just been ripped out with no notice, and this forest was now gone. And in Harper's mind, the emergence of paranormal activity in the home and its feeling, which is one of agitation and negativity, in her intuition was because whatever was living in that forest had been displaced and was mad at humans and was now almost like a refugee begrudgingly taking refuge up in her home where they'd rather not be, and were taking out their frustration and anger on her family. And so that's when she made the offering. And, you know, through guidance from a metaphysical person at a metaphysical bookstore, she made this offering of raw goat's milk and unpasteurized honey that she bought specifically for the fairies. She went out at midnight and put it in a dish and did a little ceremony with her whole family. And when they came back in, they felt immediately like the house feels better. And the next morning she went downstairs to walk the family dog, and she came walking back up the stairs. These are just like little wooden open stairs going up to the patio. And as she was walking, she felt a penny slip into her left shoe and come out the back. And she stopped and looked at it, and it was a brand new, shiny 2007 penny. And she was like, where did that come from? It didn't drop out of my clothes. It wasn't on the stair above me. Where did it come from? And she couldn't figure it out. And the next morning she was walking the dog, and again, standing in the grass while the dog was doing its business, a bright, shiny 2007 penny materialized, and she felt it slipped into her shoe again, in the left-hand shoe. And now she's got two 2007 shiny pennies that look like they've never been in circulation. And the next day she had like full shoes on that didn't have an open toe, and she was walking the dog on a section of sidewalk close to the house. She saw a little flash of light, and a third 2007 penny materialized on the ground directly next to her shoe instead of in her shoe. So what's interesting there is that what initially you could think these are bad was resolved with a simple offering and an explanation. And Harper made a point of saying, I'm really sorry that your home was destroyed. If you guys want to live with us, you can. Please just don't like hurt us or, you know, cause trouble. You can't take our ID or our keys and stuff, but otherwise we don't mind fun games around the house with stuff moving and stuff. And she did all that, and then she got an offering, and since then, you know, things have been okay. And the relationship continues to be strange. I've heard from Harper since. There's still lots of weird stuff going on, but it's no longer taken the tone of aggression or something that causes fear or concern. And so that's just one working example I can give you of what appears to be the method of, you know, establishing the relationship parameters. You can do it through open communication and just being honest with them. Like, hey, in your case, if it was me, I might try something like, I'm really happy you followed me home from the forest. I would like to know if I'm right that that's true. Could you give me another sign and see what happens, for example, you know. And if you get another sign, then I would go right back out to the forest with another cookie and say, thanks for that sign. Here's another cookie. I hope this is like good, you know. Let's keep doing this. It seems to be as simple as that. However, going back to the idea that you might in fact be a fairy or contain qualities that the fairies are fond of, I don't think they'd be communicating with you at all unless that was the case. One of the two. You're one of them, you're kin, maybe not 100% fairy, maybe let's call it like 25% fairy bloodline, for example. I don't really know what your exact percentage would be, but it could be that, or it could be as you describe. You know, many guests who come on this show have told me online or offline that they identify with the diagnosis of autism on some spectrum of that disorder, and that they absolutely, you know, to me anyway, there appears to be a direct correlation between Fae contact and those with autism. It's something that I cannot explain, but I think is a real factor in this subject matter. I don't think it's exclusively, you know, that they're interested in people with some spectrum of autism, but it is very, very common within the population that has come on this show that is a diagnosis shared with me as part of someone's understanding and interpretation of why fairies are interested in them or why they are interested in fairies. So I don't really know what to make of that. But again, like when I think about what's going on with you, how it's unfolded, what's kind of brought us into contact, I see a person who is authentically discovering something about themselves and for whom the fairies are giving acknowledgement, which is a very profound and powerful thing to contemplate going on in your life.
Wow, I really love everything that you just said. And when you were talking about how the fairy contact sometimes manifests in very chaotic ways, even though they don't have bad intentions towards you, I wanted to mention that I think it's important that people who intentionally seek out contact with the Fae, that they are more times than not very respectful, because it's always very underlined in the folklore and in the mythology that you have to be very respectful of the Fae and try to communicate with them in their way rather in your way, that you would communicate with I don't know, newly met human. And so that way I think that I think, or I'd like to think, that the Fae actually know that we as humans have good intentions towards them, and that we are not trying to do anything bad to, I don't know, destroy their places, to interrupt their words, but just build a relationship. And I think they know and understand that we do respect them. So I do find it unlikely that they would go out of their way to make our lives, worse on purpose, or make us really upset or sad, besides just doing a few pranks. So what I'm trying to say is that, I think that they know when a human is approaching them with respect. And I think, or at least I would really like to hope, that they don't seek to really cause harm to that person, because when they know that they are being respected, they are willing to build this respectful relationship.
Also, look at how well you're dealing with it. Like, just objectively, let me reflect your story back to you for a second. You've independently, pretty much of anyone around you, it sounds like, decided that you personally want to make contact with fairies. And you have. You're extremely brave, skilled, and taking a leadership position in a world where that is not a common thing to do. I'm telling you, I think you've made contact. I absolutely think you've made contact.
That's really, really encouraging to hear because, well, the, let's say, logical thing to do is to, of course, doubt myself in this situation and attribute all these happenings to just normal causes, like, oh, I just lost that nail file because I put it somewhere and I forgot about it. Just rationalizing everything, but also at the same time, it's great to hear from another person that, well, not everything has to be explained like that, that it's okay to believe that it was also something else happening there. Because, well, I really do believe in the Fae and their words, so I'm trying to not doubt myself that much that it's all not real.
That's the single hardest part, is putting your doubt aside. Let me ask you a conceptual question. Not that you know or I know. I mean, no one knows. I'm just curious what you think. When your nail file is gone and then it comes back, where is it in the time in between? Where do you think they take your nail file?
Well, if I had to guess, of course I don't know that, but if I had to guess, I would say that they just take it into their dimension, since I believe that Fae and all those other creatures, they live sort of in the same world as we do, but they do operate on other dimension or frequency. So when they communicate with us, they do it from that another frequency. And so when they take your stuff, they just take it into their world, their realm. And so at that specific moment when you don't have it, that is because it is not in your material world anymore, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And I ask you that question because I think that that's part of the unspoken message of taking and putting your stuff back, which is precisely that reality is not as real as you think it is. And without saying a word, they're showing you that. There's like this really great book from America that used to talk about how to simply teach physics. And one of the great passages in the book talks about how the teacher does not try to teach gravity. The teacher waits until he notices the student marveling at the falling leaf to teach gravity. So he waits until the student is already watching the leaf fall and wondering what is making that leaf go down. And that's when the teacher jumps in and says, this is what gravity is. This is what you're looking at. The Fae are doing that. They are taking an object, putting it back, and then that search and that curiosity about how is when they are hoping your intuition shifts gears and you go into the next gear, which is, oh, reality is not as real as I think it is. And now your intuition is matched up with a brain that has changed its logical process. And I think at that juncture, they are much more able to reach you and communicate with you. So they're kind of modulating the people that they do this to. They're massaging you with objects into changing your brain and your whole frequency so that they can better interact with you. That's also part of what I think they're doing.
I really like that analogy. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Let me ask you a few more questions here as we go to kind of wind down, because you've given so much of your time and opinions on this subject matter, and it's just such a fascinating kind of through line from where you started to us talking here today as part of your journey. It's interesting that this talk with me now is part of your journey of understanding. I hope I haven't confused you any. I hope, for what it's worth, I'll say again, you can go back and listen to every episode of Fascinating Fae, and perhaps you'll draw many of the same conclusions I have. Or at the very least, you'll understand where I'm coming from today as I say all this to you.
Well, I'd say you didn't confuse me, and if anything, you made some stuff a lot more clear to me, because some of the things that you are saying here are really the answers to the questions that I have been asking myself for some time now. So I really appreciate that you are saying all of that, because it's just something that I was also seeking an answer to, in a way, I think.
For what it's worth, I genuinely do try when I'm reading people's Reddit posts to feel with my heart through space and time and try to connect with whoever's behind that post. And I can tell sometimes when there's a person having real contact who's having those real questions. And part of the reason I guess I've branched out from just looking for de facto stories and trying to talk to those people, and I've now kind of started to talk to people who are more at the place you are, is because I have a backstory with my dear friend DK, who I believe made contact and was having experiences, but didn't have any kind of contextual support. And ultimately, he was left feeling like he'd lost his mind, even though this stuff is very real, and he took his own life.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you for saying that. And sorry, I didn't mean to drop like a trigger on you there with no warning. But just to explain why I do genuinely and sincerely reach out to people like yourself who I see are asking vague questions about objects, it just makes my alarm bells in my head go ding, 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 ding. That's who I need to talk to next. I'm more fascinated by at this stage and want to talk to people who are so early in their stages of understanding, because it's so authentic. It's not like you've already had, 5 years of contact and you're kind of talking about it like it's old news. It just feels very, very engaging and real to talk to somebody like you. And that's part of my motivation. It's satisfaction for myself to kind of refresh my belief that this is in fact real and it is in fact happening to people that don't know about it. Does that make sense? Because you don't know much about it, but everything you're telling me is exactly like the rest of this catalog. For me, that's very, very encouraging, because I'm like, yes, it's still happening to new people all over the place. It is still a modern phenomenon in 2026, July, that this stuff is taking place. Not in folklore. It's happening today. But at the same time, I appreciate you giving me that feedback, because I am doing a weird thing here, which is finding people that I don't know online, talking to them, and where I feel appropriate, telling them I think they either have fairy contact or they might be fairies. That is not a normal thing that a guy does, but it's kind of become something I'm doing. So, like I said, I don't mean to confuse or overwhelm you. I come, with a good heart to this conversation, and I just see reflected in you stuff that I can't help but, notice fits a mold and allows me the empowered feeling to state all of that. you're just exactly like what I think, the fairies are hoping we aspire to be, which is kind and logical and intuitive and curious and self-driven and unafraid and yourself. You're clearly just yourself with no pretense. And I do really think fairies know people's hearts. And all those things I just listed about you are characteristics that I've come to know and believe fairies are fond of in people. Also, you've said it a few times, and I'll kind of really acknowledge what you've said is true. They do want you to be strong somehow. They are not interested in those that are afraid. So part of testing you and part of making you a little bit unsettled is to test your strength, as much as it is to teach you about the nature of reality, as much as it is to communicate their presence. They are brilliant communicators, and with simple objects, they can say all of that just by taking something and putting it back.
Yeah, I think, yeah, also it's really nice that you're saying that the Fae might appreciate me for who I am, and they might see that I have all these good intentions towards them, because what I'm always trying to say whenever I visit them in that place in the forest, what I'm always trying to convey to them is that please just see me for who I am and believe me that I have a good heart and good intentions, and that I don't want to hurt you, fairies, and I just really want to be your friend, and there are no hidden interests of mine here, and this is just genuine. And hearing you saying that they might have actually known this all along is very, very important to me, as I was worried that I must keep somehow proving myself to them. But it's good to know that they know if people have good hearts.
They do. I have said they know your heart countless times on this show, and I certainly appreciate you for who you are. And for that reason, I'm sure the fairies do as well. You strike me as very genuine and well-intentioned, like you say. I don't detect any malice in you, in your person whatsoever, and that's a rare quality. So please don't ever change. We need more people like yourself on this world. Okay, well, Monica, with all that said, and out of respect for the fact that I know it's getting a little late in Poland there, I notice as well we're getting close to 2 hours, and I always try to keep these episodes around 2 hours out of respect for your time and the audience's time. If it's okay with you, I will sort of spend the next 5 or 10 minutes winding down with you as we kind of go to wrap up this conversation episode, if that's okay with you.
Of course, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Well, before I, start to wind down, I'll hand it back over to you for a second. Was there any other details or things that you think might intuitively be linked to this contact you've made? I know you mentioned the nail file, the glitter, and the Tamagotchi. Was there anything else that, came up? And one question I did want to ask as well, did you notice if your offerings had been taken?
Oh wow, I can't believe I forgot to talk about this, but yeah, about the offerings being taken. One time I brought to the forest an offering that consisted of some strawberries from my garden, some other. They are called red berries in Poland. I don't know the English name. And also I brought something a non-edible thing, but it had sentimental value for me. So I thought that it would also be good as an offer to them to show my sympathy for them, because I am now giving them something that is very dear to me. And so I remember I put it all in one of the tree stumps, and I went to check on it the very next day, and almost all of the things have disappeared from the tree stump. So when it comes to the strawberries and the red berries, I thought, and that's the always logical part of the brain, I thought, oh, maybe a bird saw them and ate them, or another animal that lives in the woods, maybe it had smelled the fruits and have eaten them. But then also that different object that I said was not edible, and it had that sentimental value for me, it also disappeared. So that was a sign for me that, okay, maybe it really wasn't an animal, because an animal wouldn't take it, you know? And that was a sign for me that, wow, this is absolutely real. Someone or something has taken these things somewhere.
May I ask, and it's okay if you're not comfortable telling me, what was the object with sentimental value?
Well, I don't know if I can even call it an object, because frankly, it's a piece of a wood, but it is from a specific tree that is very important to me, because it's related to history, also with my family. And the tree was because the tree has fallen and it's dead now, but the tree was almost 100 years old. So when I saw it not too long ago, that it had dropped to the ground and it was dead now, I decided to take some of the wood with me to my house, because it's very important to me, and I wanted to keep it as sort of a keepsake for me. And by giving a piece of that wood to the Fae in by the way, a whole different section of the forest, it is kilometers away from where that dead tree is. So it's not from their forest per se, but I thought that by giving them that piece of the wood from that tree that was really important to me, I will show them that this is that I am honest, and that I am giving them something that is very important and dear to me, because essentially I trust them, and I would also like them to trust me.
Yeah, a piece of wood is an inexplicable thing for an animal to take. And when you said what it was, I got full body goosebumps there, which is something that occasionally happens to me on the show when someone is talking about an act performed by the Fae, or the Fae, are around. I grow more and more convinced as I speak with you that you've done everything that you're outlining. I think you've absolutely unlocked your initial understanding of the fact that they might be real. You've taken the bold psychological step of going and taking action. You've received a confirmation in the way of your offering being taken, and you've received confirmation in the way of object communication starting in your home. all of which follows a remarkably similar pattern that could be put on a spreadsheet that is coming to me from people around the world who don't know each other, whom all of these people are, through accident or intention, unlocking the same phenomenon. And it behaves the same way because it's done by the same type of entity, the Fae. They're very, very real. And this is a careful and important time for you to maintain your grounding and just continue to do what you're doing. I would say you don't really need any advice or support from me in that regard. But I will always caution anyone, this can be overwhelming. And so make sure that you find ways to put it down for a while at times and do other things and come back to it as necessary. Also, again, I told you a second ago, I don't make offerings. I also don't really make deals or give commands, but I will reflect back to you from what I've heard from many, many people. It appears totally possible to set verbal guidelines with them, such as, I like objects moving and coming back, but it can never be my keys or my ID. I like it when you make funny noises and scare me, but I don't want you to ever scare my friends. Stuff like that.
Yeah, and I also have heard about that before, that the Fae, they really respect when you put boundaries, and they will really listen to it. And that they might be a little mischievous or chaotic, as we've mentioned before, but they really will listen to you if you tell them that this is not okay for me, please don't do that. And that also shows a certain level, in my opinion, of mutual respect again.
I agree with all that assessment. And what you've learned through folklore research matches what I've learned through direct firsthand eyewitness conversation. How funny is that? I started off thinking folklore was like Disney movie stuff for little girls. I really did. And nowadays I'm like, oh, folklore contains a lot of facts and information in it about this same phenomenon that's been going on forever. Actually, that gives me a chance to ask you kind of an important conceptual question as we start to officially wind down now. Also, I'm glad I asked you again if you had anything associated with if your offerings had been taken, because I'm starting to learn to trust my intuition. I always, towards the end of episodes, somehow am compelled to ask an important question that didn't make it into the mix. So it happened again there, and that's a very important detail, that your piece of wood was taken. What a beautiful gift, too, of a piece of a fallen tree that you hold close to your heart. I mean, that subtle gesture is so Fae. You're so fairy. You're so... Only a fairy would find a piece of fallen tree important. Do you catch my point? I mean that in a complimentary way.
Absolutely. And that's very kind of you.
It's just an observation. No judgment. I just see it for what it is. It's extremely touching to think about a person caring that way and then using that as their offering. You're talking their language, Monica. I'm sure you are. What was I going to ask you there? Oh, yeah. How long do you think fairies have been here? Is kind of my first part to a complicated question, but let's start there. How long do you think they've been around?
Around us in this earth?
Yeah, with us.
Well, I think, I'm not really sure, but what if they were here even before humans? I think that there's definitely a possibility, or at the very least, they started living here around the times when humans did. But I really do think that they might be here even earlier.
I think that that's a very good assessment and intuition, and it gives me a chance to ask my next question. So I ask this question to everybody that comes on the show. There is no correct answer or incorrect answer. I'm asking this question because I like to hear your thoughts and feelings in one place. And I know we've talked about it a little bit and a lot all night, but I'm just going to ask you, just in one place here. The question is, Monica, what do you think that fairies are?
Well, it's not that easy to answer because a fairy is kind of an umbrella term, There are many, many different genres of fairies, just like we were talking about the brownies, and there are also the pixies, the elves. There are many, many of them, but if I had to define the umbrella term that is the Fae, I would say that they are beings that operate on a, like I said, different frequency, or they live in a parallel sort of universe than us, and that it is possible for humans to get in touch with them essentially. But most humans don't do that because they just brush it off as folklore, or but I think if a person does enough research and believes that there are real beings, that they can make contact with them. And I think that the Fae are beings, like I said, from maybe another world, or they are on a different frequency. They are essentially living beings, but it's also important to remember that they are not humans, and they are not like humans at all. They might live by, for example, different rules. They have different hierarchies. So it's always important to take all of that into account when you want to learn more about their worlds. That it's important to not judge them by our own standards, because they are not of the humankind. They are something entirely different.
That is a very excellent and complete answer. Thank you very much. And I agree with something you said there, which is that anybody could do the research and figure this out. But I will remind you that it takes, in fact, a very special person like yourself to actually go ahead and do that. And so never forget your special quality that's allowed you to unlock this knowledge. And something that is abundantly clear to me is that you will continue to progress in your knowledge, understanding, and relationship with the Fae as time goes on. You're just getting started. For that reason, it is so cool to talk to you. Honestly, it makes for such a compelling and interesting episode of Fascinating Fae to talk with you here tonight, Monica. You've been very, very great. Your English is totally clear. I've understood every word and emotion behind what you're saying here tonight. So thank you again for having, the extra courage to come on and do an interview in English, which is not your first language. It's been really, really great to talk to you tonight. Thank you again very, very much.
Thank you. And yeah, it was also great to speak and conversate here with you. And I also learned something new from you. I mean, it was important to me to hear that I might, in fact, be a bit, I don't know, related to the Fae. And also it was important to me to hear that they are communicating with me not out of malice, but because they see me, and in a way they also appreciate me. So thank you for that.
I couldn't understand a world in which anyone would bear malice towards you. You honestly strike me as a sweetheart through and through. So that's that's where I come up with the idea, in part, that this is all benevolent as it relates to the story you've shared with me here tonight. It's just a reflection of your personhood, most of all, that informs that perspective. I just don't think they would have any reason to be anything other than delighted by you. So carry on. I'm sure you're going to be just fine in terms of that, aspect of your relationship building with fairies and with others in your life for that matter. Okay, well, we've come to the kind of point in the show where I've asked my favorite question. I've done my thorough curiosity-based question answering and asking, so I think we're pretty good. If it's okay with you, what I'll do next here is this. I am just going to do like 1 minute of housekeeping, signing off, giving my email address, that sort of stuff. When I'm finished, I'll ask you to say some last words, which is how I will actually finish the episode. So if you will be so kind as to just hang out for a minute while I sign off, I will get right back to you and ask you for those last words. Is that cool with you?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. For everybody, excuse me. For everybody listening tonight, you've been listening to Fascinating Fae, and I am your host, Jim. If you've had a trajectory of exploration of the fairy subject matter unfolding in your life, and you'd like to come on the show and talk with me about it at any stage of your understanding, I'm always interested to hear from new people. So please shoot me an email and tell me your story at encounters@fascinatingfae.com. You can also check out fascinatingfae.com for the occasional photo reference in episodes or other show notes. If you'd also like to, you can send me a DM on any social media where you can find the show at Fascinating Fae, and that's a great way to get in contact with me as well. With all that said, I don't have anything more of value that I can really add here tonight, so I'll say this. Monica, on behalf of all of our human and non-human listeners that are tuning into Fascinating Fae tonight, a super big thanks to you for coming on the show. Again, I've really appreciated your time and everything you've shared, all your thoughts and feelings. It's been really great. Thank you so much again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much too, and thanks for teaching me something new as well.
Honestly, the pleasure's mine. I feel like refreshed in my, sense that this is still something that is worth doing, because there's always new people to, connect and connect to this larger story, which is something that, I think is important to pay forward as we all carry on. But enough out of me, because I'm usually zipping it by this point, but you've just sort of paid a nice compliment there, and I felt I needed to respond. Monica, if you'd be so kind, please provide some last parting words here for myself and the audience tonight.
Well, let me think. I think what I would like to say the most is that it's okay to believe in magic, because if you start to believing it enough, it will believe you back, if that makes sense. I think it does, especially in the context of the Fae.
Close your eyes, you are fading. I noticed you're in a dream. Rest your mind from your waking life. I notice you are sleeping in a dream. In a dream. In a dream. In a dream. The sun hangs high on the heavens and slowly melts to the base. Later light in the evening. If only I could stay in a dream. In a dream. In a dream. In a dream. Every night we're sleeping, we drift away. We spend a third of our lives that way. Many times I sleep and I remember my dreams, and I often wish that I could stay. That I could stay. That I could stay that way. That I could stay. That I could stay that way.